The police cruiser pulled into my driveway at 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, right as I was serving dinner to my 3 children. "Ma'am, we've received a complaint that you stole $15,000 from Harold and Judith Brennan." My 9-year-old daughter started crying before I could even process the words, while my in-laws stood on my front lawn with matching expressions of righteous satisfaction, watching my humiliation like it was entertainment. But what Harold and Judith didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have anticipated, was that I had spent the last 18 months documenting every single interaction with them, including the loan agreement they had signed, the repayment receipts they had accepted, and the phone call from 3 weeks ago where Judith had admitted in explicit detail that they were planning to destroy me with lies. I had learned a long time ago that the Brennan family weaponized everything. I just never expected them to weaponize the police against me in front of my children. I married Kevin Brennan when I was 24 years old, young and naive and desperately in love with a man who seemed like everything I had ever wanted. Kevin was charming, handsome, successful, a rising star at his father's construction company with a bright future and a smile that made my knees weak. His family seemed warm and welcoming at first, embracing me into their fold with open arms and promises of forever. The mask didn't slip until after the wedding. It started small. Judith would make comments about my cooking, my cleaning, my lack of domestic skills. Harold would lecture me about financial responsibility, implying that my middle-class upbringing hadn't prepared me for real money management. They would show up unannounced, rearrange my furniture, criticize my parenting, and report everything back to Kevin like I was an employee under review rather than their son's wife. Kevin always took their side. Always. "They're just trying to help," he would say whenever I complained. "They know more about life than you do. You should be grateful." I wasn't grateful. I was trapped. But I stayed, for 12 years, because of my children. Because I believed that a bad marriage was better than a broken home. Because every time I thought about leaving, Judith would remind me that the Brennan family had resources and connections, and that I would never win a custody battle against them. "We'll make sure you never see those children again," she told me once, her voice sweet as poison. I thought about it. For years, I thought about it. And then Kevin made my decision for me. The affair started in year 10 of our marriage. Her name was Brittany, 23 years old, blonde, a receptionist at the construction company. Kevin didn't even try to hide it after the first few months. He would come home smelling like her perfume, check his phone constantly, disappear for work emergencies that lasted entire weekends. When I confronted him, he laughed. "What are you going to do about it, Monica? Leave? With what money? With what lawyer? My parents will bury you. You'll be lucky to get supervised visitation." He was right, and we both knew it. I had been a stay-at-home mother for 9 years, at his insistence. I had no income, no savings in my own name, no career to fall back on. Everything we owned was in his name or his parents' names. I was financially dependent on a man who had stopped loving me years ago, if he ever had at all. But Kevin made a mistake. He underestimated me. I spent 18 months preparing my escape. I got a part-time job at a local bookstore, just to get out of the house, I told Kevin, who approved because it made me less clingy. I opened a bank account in my own name at a different bank than our joint accounts. I started documenting everything, his absences, his affairs, his parents' threats, every financial transaction I could access. And I hired a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, Denise Okafor, a family attorney with a reputation for taking on wealthy, powerful families and winning. She worked on a sliding scale for clients in my situation, and she taught me the most important lesson of my life. In family court, documentation is everything. They can lie all they want, but paper doesn't lie. Record everything. Save everything. Trust no one. I followed her advice religiously. The loan from Harold and Judith happened during month 14 of my preparation. Kevin lost his job. It happened suddenly, a restructuring at the company, which was really just Harold deciding that Kevin's incompetence had become too expensive to ignore. Kevin had been coasting on his family name for years, showing up late, making mistakes, alienating clients. When Harold finally cut him loose, Kevin spiraled. He stopped looking for work. He started drinking heavily. He became mean in ways he had never been before, not physically violent, but verbally cruel, tearing me down in front of the children, blaming me for his failures. And then the bills started piling up. The mortgage. The car payments. The credit cards Kevin had maxed out buying gifts for Brittany. Within 3 months, we were drowning in debt, facing foreclosure, watching our carefully constructed upper-middle-class life collapse around us. That's when Harold and Judith offered to help. "We'll loan you $15,000, Harold said, his voice dripping with condescension. "To cover the mortgage and get Kevin back on his feet. But we need this in writing, Monica. We need to protect ourselves." I should have refused. I should have seen the trap being laid. but my children needed a roof over their heads. My 9-year-old, my 7-year-old, my 4-year-old, they didn't deserve to be homeless because their father was a failure and their grandparents were predators. So I agreed. But I insisted on my own protections. The loan agreement was 3 pages long. I drafted it myself, with guidance from Denise. It specified the amount, $15,000, the repayment terms, monthly installments of $500 over 30 months, the interest rate, 0%, and most importantly, the signatures of all parties involved. Harold and Judith signed it. Kevin signed it. I signed it. I made 4 copies. One for them, one for Kevin, one for my lawyer, and one for a safe deposit box they didn't know I had. Then I started making payments. Every month, without fail, I transferred $500 to their account. Every month, I saved the confirmation receipt. Every month, I sent them an email acknowledging the payment, and every month, they responded with a brief "received" that created a paper trail they didn't realize they were building. By the time Kevin filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, which was rich coming from the man who had been sleeping with his receptionist for 2 years, I had paid back $7,500 of the loan. And then everything changed. The divorce was brutal. Kevin's lawyer, paid for by Harold and Judith, of course, came at me with everything they had. They claimed I was an unfit mother. They claimed I had mental health issues that made me dangerous. They claimed I had been financially irresponsible and had stolen from the marital accounts. Every claim was a lie. Every claim was designed to destroy me. But I had documentation. I had records showing that Kevin had made every financial decision in our marriage, that he had controlled our accounts, that he had signed off on every major purchase. I had evidence of his affair. I had evidence of his drinking. I had testimony from teachers and doctors and neighbors establishing that I was the primary caregiver for our children. And I had Denise, who was worth every penny I had scraped together to pay her. The judge saw through the Brennan family's lies. I was awarded primary custody, child support, and a fair division of assets, which wasn't much, given that Kevin had already burned through most of our savings. The house was sold, the debts were paid, and I moved into a modest rental with my children. We were starting over. We were free. Or so I thought. The harassment started immediately after the divorce was finalized. Harold and Judith couldn't accept that they had lost. They couldn't accept that a woman they considered beneath them had beaten them in court. They couldn't accept that their grandchildren now lived primarily with me, in a house they didn't own, in a life they couldn't control. So they started a campaign of destruction. They called CPS with false reports of neglect. Investigated and dismissed. They contacted my employer with lies about my instability. My manager saw through it. They showed up at my children's school, trying to take them without my permission. The school called the police. Each time, I documented everything. Each time, I added to the file that Denise was building. Each time, I prepared for the next attack. But I didn't expect them to go this far. 3 weeks before the police showed up at my door, Judith called me. She didn't know I was recording. Georgia is a one-party consent state, and I had learned the hard way to record every interaction with the Brennan family. "Monica," she said, her voice syrupy with false sweetness. "I'm calling to discuss the loan repayment. I've been making payments every month, Judith. I have the receipts." "Well, that's just it." Her voice hardened. "We've decided we want the remaining balance paid in full. Immediately. $7,500, or we'll be forced to take legal action." "That's not what the agreement says. The agreement specifies monthly payments of $500 over 30 months. I'm in full compliance." "The agreement?" She laughed. "What agreement? We never signed any agreement. We gave you that money as a gift, to help our son, and you've been pocketing it. Harold and I have discussed it, and we believe you've stolen from us." My blood ran cold. "Judith, you signed the agreement. I have your signature. I have the repayment receipts. I have everything documented. Documents can be fabricated." Her voice was ice now. "We've already spoken to the police. We're filing a report. You stole $15,000 from us, Monica, and you're going to pay, one way or another." "You're lying. You know you're lying. Good luck proving that." She hung up. I sat in my kitchen, shaking, listening to the recording playback. And I realized that this was it, the attack I had been waiting for. The one designed to finally destroy me. But Judith had made a critical error. She had admitted, on tape, that she was planning to lie to the police. The 3 weeks between that phone call and the police arrival were the longest of my life. I consulted with Denise. I organized my documentation. I prepared myself mentally for what I knew was coming. "They're going to try to have you arrested," Denise said grimly. "Filing a false police report is a crime, but the police don't know it's false when they show up. You'll need to be calm, cooperative, and ready to present your evidence clearly." "What if they arrest me anyway?" Then we fight it in court. But Monica, she looked me in the eyes. I've seen your documentation. It's airtight. They can't win this. They can only hurt you temporarily. Temporarily. As if being arrested in front of my children would be a temporary wound. But I had no choice. The Brennans were coming for me, and all I could do was be ready. The evening they arrived, I was making spaghetti. Emma, my 9-year-old, was setting the table. Lucas, 7, was doing homework at the kitchen counter. Sophie, 4, was watching cartoons in the living room. It was a normal Tuesday evening, peaceful, domestic, ordinary. Then the doorbell rang. I opened it to find 2 police officers on my porch, with Harold and Judith standing behind them on the lawn. Judith was wearing a cardigan and pearls, the picture of wealthy respectability. Harold had his arm around her, playing the supportive husband. "Ma'am," the first officer said, "we've received a complaint that you stole $15,000 from Harold and Judith Brennan. May we come in?" My children had gathered behind me by then. Emma was already crying. She remembered the CPS visits, the school incident, the constant harassment. She knew that when Grandma and Grandpa showed up with official people, bad things happened. "Of course, officer," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Please, come in. I have documentation that will clear this up immediately." "She's lying." Judith's voice rang out from the lawn. "She's a thief and a liar. She stole from us and she's going to prison." "Ma'am, please stay back," the second officer said to Judith. "We'll handle this." I led the officers into my kitchen, painfully aware of my children watching from the doorway. Lucas had his arm around Sophie, who was clutching her stuffed rabbit with white-knuckled hands. "Kids, go to your rooms please. Everything is going to be okay." They didn't move. "Please," I said, my voice breaking. "I need you to trust me. Go to your rooms." Emma finally nodded and led her siblings upstairs. I heard their footsteps on the stairs, heard Emma's door close, and then I turned to face the officers. "What exactly are the allegations?" I asked. The first officer, his name tag said Morrison, consulted his notes. "Mr. and Mrs. Brennan claim that you borrowed $15,000 from them 2 years ago and have refused to pay it back. They also claim that you've been making threatening phone calls demanding more money." "None of that is true." I walked to my kitchen drawer, slowly, carefully, keeping my hands visible, and pulled out a folder. "This is the loan agreement, signed by Harold and Judith Brennan, specifying repayment terms of $500 per month for 30 months. And these," I pulled out a stack of bank statements, "are the receipts showing that I've made 15 payments totaling $7,500, exactly according to the agreement." Officer Morrison examined the documents. His partner, whose tag read Chen, looked over his shoulder. "This appears to be signed by them," Morrison said slowly. "It is. I also have copies held by my attorney and in a safe deposit box. The signatures can be verified." She forged them. Judith had come inside, despite being told to stay back. Harold was right behind her. "She's a criminal. She's been forging documents for years." "Mrs. Brennan, I asked you to wait outside. These are my grandchildren's home. You can't keep me out." Judith's face was flushed, her carefully maintained composure cracking. "That woman is a thief and a liar and she's trying to destroy our family." "Actually," I said, reaching back into the drawer, "I have one more thing you should hear." I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Judith's voice filled the kitchen. "We've decided we want the remaining balance paid in full. Immediately. $7,500, or we'll be forced to take legal action." My voice, "That's not what the agreement says. The agreement specifies monthly payments of $500 over 30 months. I'm in full compliance." Judith's voice, "The agreement? What agreement? We never signed any agreement." My voice, "Judith, you signed the agreement. I have your signature. I have the repayment receipts." Judith's voice, "Documents can be fabricated. We've already spoken to the police. We're filing a report. You stole $15,000 from us, Monica, and you're going to pay, one way or another." My voice, "You're lying. You know you're lying." Judith's voice, cold and certain, "Good luck proving that." The recording ended. The kitchen was absolutely silent. Officer Morrison turned to Harold and Judith. His expression had changed, hardened, in a way that made Harold take a step backward. "Ma'am. Sir." His voice was ice. "Filing a false police report is a felony in the state of Georgia. That recording is fake." Judith shrieked. "She fabricated it. She." "The recording can be authenticated," I said calmly. "It was made on my iPhone, which timestamps and stores the original file. My attorney already has a copy, as does a digital forensics expert who has verified its authenticity." Officer Morrison nodded slowly. "Mrs. Brennan, Mr. Brennan, I'm going to need you to come with us to the station to answer some questions." "This is outrageous." Harold finally found his voice. "Do you know who I am?" Do you know who my friends are? I play golf with, sir. I don't care who you play golf with. What I care about is that you appear to have filed a false police report to harass your former daughter-in-law. That's a crime. Morrison gestured toward the door. Let's go. Judith looked at me with pure hatred, the mask finally, completely gone. You'll regret this, she hissed. You have no idea what we can do to you. I have a pretty good idea, actually, I said. You've been doing it for 12 years. But here's what you don't understand, Judith, I'm not afraid of you anymore. I have documentation of every threat, every harassment, every lie. And I'm done being your victim. Officer Chen took Judith's arm. She tried to pull away, and for a moment, I thought she might actually run. She didn't. She was too proud for that. But the look on her face as she was led out of my house, the disbelief, the fury, the dawning realization that she had finally gone too far, was something I will remember for the rest of my life. Harold followed, still blustering about his connections, his lawyers, the lawsuit he was going to file. Officer Morrison paused at my door. Ma'am, you'll probably need to come down to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement. Bring all your documentation. I will. Thank you, officer. He nodded and followed his partner to the cruiser, where Harold and Judith were being placed in the back seat. I stood in my doorway and watched them go. My children came downstairs the moment the police cars pulled away. Emma was still crying, but it was a different kind of crying now, relief mixed with residual fear. Lucas was holding Sophie's hand, his jaw set in a determined line that reminded me, painfully, of his father. Mom? Emma's voice was small. What happened? I knelt down and gathered all three of them into my arms. Grandma and Grandpa told a lie to the police. They said I did something bad, but I didn't. I had proof that I didn't, and the police believed me. Are they going to jail? Lucas asked. I don't know, sweetheart. They might get in trouble for lying. But what I need you to understand is that you're safe. We're safe. No one is going to take you away from me. Sophie buried her face in my shoulder. I don't like Grandma, she whispered. I know, baby. I know. We stayed like that for a long time, huddled together on the kitchen floor, holding on to each other. The spaghetti went cold on the stove. The homework sat unfinished on the counter. None of it mattered. My children were safe. We were together. And the people who had tormented us for years had finally faced a consequence they could ant by or charm their way out of. Harold and Judith Brennan were charged with filing a false police report. The case took 8 months to work through the system. Their lawyers tried everything, motions to dismiss, claims of misunderstanding, arguments that the recording had been taken out of context. None of it worked. In the end, they pleaded no contest to avoid a trial. Harold received a $5,000 fine and 2 years of probation. Judith received the same. Both were required to complete 200 hours of community service. They also received a restraining order. My attorney filed for one immediately after their arrest, citing the years of harassment, the false CPS reports, the school incidents, and now the false police report. The judge granted it without hesitation. Harold and Judith Brennan are no longer permitted to contact me, my children, my employer, or any member of my household. They cannot come within 500 feet of my home, my workplace, or my children's schools. They cannot send messages through third parties, including their son. Kevin, predictably, was furious. He blamed me for destroying his family, for turning his parents into criminals, for poisoning his children against him. But Kevin's opinion doesn't matter much these days. He lost his visitation rights 6 months ago after showing up drunk to a scheduled pickup. The children haven't seen him in almost a year, and they don't ask about him anymore. Some losses are actually gains. It's been 2 years since that Tuesday evening. Emma is 11 now, thriving in middle school, talking about becoming a lawyer someday. I want to help people like you, Mom, she told me recently. People who need someone to believe them. Lucas is 9, obsessed with soccer and video games, slowly learning that not all families are like ours was. He goes to therapy twice a month, working through the trauma of those early years. He's getting better. Sophie is 6, starting first grade, barely remembering a time when Grandma and Grandpa were part of our lives. She's the lucky one, young enough that most of the damage won't stick. I work full-time now, managing the bookstore where I started as a part-time clerk during my escape planning. The owner retired last year and offered me the position. It doesn't pay a fortune, but it pays enough. And it's mine, built on my own work, my own merit, my own determination. The loan to Harold and Judith? I finished paying it off, every single penny, despite what they did. I sent the final $500 payment the week before their court date, along with a certified letter acknowledging the completion of repayment per our original agreement. I wanted the record to be perfect. I wanted there to be no ambiguity, no loose ends, no possible claim they could make against me. But mostly, I did it because my grandmother taught me that integrity matters even when, especially when, the other person has none. You can't control what other people do, she used to say. You can only control who you are. Be someone you're proud of, and the rest will work itself out. She was right. Last month, I ran into Kevin at the grocery store. He looked terrible, thinner, older, with a haunted look in his eyes that I didn't recognize. He was buying frozen dinners and cheap beer, the shopping cart of a man living alone and not coping well. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the produce section. Monica, he said finally. The kids are fine, happy, healthy. I just want to see them. I'm their father. You lost that right when you chose alcohol over them, Kevin. You know how to petition the court for supervised visitation. You know what the requirements are. Do the work, and maybe someday. He didn't argue. He didn't threaten. He didn't call his parents to fight his battles. He just nodded, turned around, and walked away. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered Emma crying in the doorway while police officers questioned me about theft I didn't commit. I remembered Lucas's white face as his grandmother screamed accusations. I remembered Sophie clutching her stuffed rabbit like it was the only safe thing in the world. Kevin Brennan made his choices. So did his parents. And I made mine. The documentation habit never went away. I still save every important email. I still keep receipts for major transactions. I still record conversations when I have the legal right to do so and the instinct that something might go wrong. It's not paranoia. It's preparation. Because I learned something during those years of marriage, those months of planning, those terrifying moments when the police showed up at my door to arrest me for a crime I didn't commit. I learned that the truth doesn't protect itself. You have to protect the truth. You have to document it, preserve it, defend it against people who would rather destroy you than admit they're wrong. I learned that family isn't about blood, it's about loyalty, respect, and love that doesn't come with conditions or threats. And I learned that I am stronger than anyone ever gave me credit for. Stronger than Kevin, who crumbled at the first real challenge he faced. Stronger than Harold and Judith, whose power evaporated the moment someone finally stood up to them. Stronger than the scared young bride who walked into that family 14 years ago, desperate to be loved and willing to accept abuse in its place. That woman is gone. In her place is someone who knows her worth, protects her children, and never, ever, lets anyone make her feel small again. The Brennans thought they could destroy me. They were wrong. I destroyed them instead, not with lies or manipulation or money or connections. Just with the truth. And a really, really good filing system.